We know Bond likes his martinis shaken, not stirred. But apparently, it's the same with his eggs. Now, what is it with James Bond and scrambled eggs? Out of 12 novels, there are only 3 books in which Fleming doesn't mention scrambled eggs. Well, let's unscramble this mess today on PCZ TV. PCZ TV.
How exhilarating!
Full confession, I was going to do my typical book-by-book analysis, graphs and all, and then maybe try to, spice it up with a cooking video, until I saw the amazing analysis by both JamesBondLifestyle.com and the James Bond Dossier websites on this very topic. And they did a much better job than I. So I'm going to pivot to answer the question of why. Why does Fleming have Bond eat scrambled eggs so much?
Now let us examine this more carefully, huh?
Let's consider the theories. Is it only because Fleming likes them? Is it an attempt to differentiate Bond from the English lower classes? Is it a way for the English reader to live vicariously through someone who isn't burdened by the rationing in England? Is it an attempt to differentiate Bond from American detective novels and to Britishify him? Is it the use of a literary metaphor? Oh, and to see how Fleming used coffee and tea symbolism in his novels, see this video. And then, just for bonus material, I shall try cooking eggs Bond style.
Yeah, baby, yeah!
First up, Fleming. And back to BondLifestyle.com, where they identify the highlight of Fleming's articles for the Sunday Times about 14 exotic cities around the world, a world filled with wild and exotic foods, and Fleming's focuses on eggs. For instance, in Hong Kong, one of the finest culinary destinations in the world, Fleming focuses on scrambled eggs. Ian, seriously? The British weren't terribly adventurous back then, were they? Fleming is definitely not Anthony Bourdain. Well, with multiple studies that have looked at the Bond character and contrasted against Fleming, the womanizing, public schools, Royal Navy, boozing, fast cars, the reality is that James Bond is essentially Fleming's alter ego. So since Fleming likes scrambled eggs a lot, therefore so does Bond. The next logical question is, of course, why? Why does Fleming like scrambled eggs? Well, let's take a look at the traditional English breakfast, a full English breakfast that typically includes bacon, sausages, fried eggs, fried tomatoes, fried mushrooms, black pudding, baked beans, and toast. Oh, by the way, it's really good. So you would think that this is just Fleming and Bond's breakfast of champions, right? But it's not. And why? Well, I submit, fundamentally, Fleming is upper class. And the English upper class typically had a lighter breakfast than the full English. They partook in fresh pastries or scones, smoked salmon, or scrambled eggs. So why the contrast? Well, after all, the upper class weren't doing manual labor, so they didn't need the calories. So Bond's love of scrambled eggs supports his upper class position, as does his love of hard-to-obtain American bacon versus the back bacon typically found. Or perhaps the love of scrambled eggs comes from the Royal Navy. Did they serve eggs a lot?
And may I take this opportunity of emphasizing that there is no cannibalism in the British Navy.
Well, looking at the week's breakfast menu from 1942 on the King George V, no, it wasn't the Royal Navy, as they only had eggs once a week. And it didn't even indicate if it was fried or scrambled. So that's it. It's a class thing and a Fleming alter ego thing, right? Or is it? I alluded earlier to hard-to-get items. And this leads us directly on to the next theory. This theory focuses on the idea that Fleming initially was writing for the English audience of that era. These are folks who really suffered through World War II, and unlike America, Britain was essentially bankrupt after World War II, so rationing continued until the 50s. Imagine that, almost a full decade after the war, they were still rationing items such as meat, sugar, bread, butter, bacon, clothes, petrol, travel, and eggs.
Okay, the egg sandwich was very important in the early 70s. One of the reasons for that is the egg itself, to some people, was still something of a miracle. There were people who had been born and brought up during the war who believed that egg was a type of powder, and then they discovered it's an actual three-dimensional thing that comes out of a chicken's arse.
So here we have James Bond, quite the connoisseur. He appreciates real eggs. But, there's also another interpretation on this. Scrambled eggs are the simplest of meals, and even though Bond has access to the finest food and drink, his favorite meal is a simple breakfast. Is this a way to ground the Bond character to the audience, to humanize him? And perhaps it's also a way to take the sting out of rationing. Stiff upper lip, old chaps. Life isn't really all that greener on the other side. See, I like simple foods. And so far, each of these theories is plausible for the egg connection. But is there more? Some other literary metaphors, perhaps?
Explain.
In the 1930s, the American detective novels created a new genre, the hard-boiled detective. We all know them, right? Tough guys, nonconformists, the ones who had the one-line quips, and is happy to get beat up to prove his point.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Marlowe. I'm so glad you could make it.
It's nice to have a night out with the boys.
I think you're a very stupid person. You look stupid, you're in a stupid business, and you're on a stupid case.
I get it. I'm stupid.
Well, this genre was the American reaction to the whodunit books of English writers such as Agatha Christie, whose characters were oh so English and proper, and solved murders while having afternoon tea.
And who are you?
My name is Hercule Poirot, and I am probably the greatest detective in the world.
But Bond, well, he's English, but he's different than the Agatha Christie type character. He's also famous for his quips and for getting beat up.
I've got a little itch. Would you mind?
So, is Bond an evolution between these two genres, differentiated from the Americans in an English way? So he's not a hard-boiled egg, he's scrambled. Another potential metaphor is that scrambled eggs are an allusion to a changing world. The new world of the Cold War. A place with new, chaotic, and disorganized global relations where everything has changed, nothing is as seems that it is. It's all mixed up, it's all scrambled together. So which theory is right?
I'm exhausted.
Or are all of these things scrambled together to lead to another egg joke?
And now for something completely different.
And as promised, let's examine how Fleming cooks his scrambled eggs and see if we can tease anything out from that culinary approach. First, full disclosure, I am not a chef. Second, at least Bond had the courtesy to combine his cooking and drinking. So we're going to look into James Bond in New York, where Fleming focused and gave a specific recipe for scrambled eggs. Some caveats. I do not have copper plates or pans. I looked about for something appropriately 1960s feel, and I think this bowl looks the part. And the plates? Oh, these were hilarious, as they look super 60s, so I had to get them. And for a pan, well, it's a good old American cast iron pan. And Taittinger Rosé? Couldn't find it anywhere, but Taittinger does own a California vineyard and produces a sparkling wine, which I'm sure will fit the bill just fine. And no, unlike Bond in From Russia with Love, I don't have any very fresh speckled brown eggs from French Moran hens, but I did get brown eggs. And I did not get a large pat of deep yellow Jersey butter. I'm in LA. To us, Jersey butter might mean New Jersey, a place you do not want to get butter from.
New Jersey! Let's take a look.
Okay, the toast. It's described as whole wheat toast, and for the record, by the 1950s, about 80% of bread sold in Britain was pre-sliced, so I don't feel bad with some store-bought pre-sliced bread. And some bacon. Bond loves American bacon. And chives.
Oh, stewardess, I speak jive.
Oh, good.
No, I said chives. Okay, let's start this Food Channel experiment of scrambled eggs and toasts. We'll follow the Bond recipe, which is for 4 individuals, and I'm not 4 folks, so proportionally smaller serving. And before we begin, to the Taittinger. And for a review of all the drinking of James Bond in Fleming's novels, watch this video series. Step 1. Break eggs into bowl. Beat thoroughly with fork and season well. Stirring, stirring, stirring. Step 2. Melt butter. Stirring, stirring, stirring. When the butter is melted, pour in the eggs and cook over a very low heat, whisking continuously. When the eggs are slightly more moist than you would wish for eating, remove pan from heat, put in the rest of the butter, and continue whisking. And boy, I gotta tell you, I had no idea how quickly these would cook. My toast and bacon aren't even close to being ready. Off the heat, continue stirring, and add more butter. Now this recipe only uses butter, but David's article did find an interesting early original manuscript that included the recipe with a postscript to add cream. This actually aligns with Gordon Ramsay.
This is where it takes on a completely different level. A little spoon, sour cream or creme fraiche, just a teaspoon.
And finally, some chives. Okay, forget the bread. We're going to the Taittinger. How do you open this thing? Is there like an easy open pull tab? I suspect not. And pardon me while I awkwardly open this bottle. More Taittinger. Cue the low music. Now on to the taste test. Well, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of scrambled eggs, but if you watch this Jamie Oliver video, you'll see a real chef making scrambled eggs 3 ways, one of which he describes as British, which is the Bond way.
We're gonna go a la English way, a la the French way, and the American way.
So my conclusion, have I beaten this topic to death?
You put all your eggs in one basket, egghead. A fatal mistake.
To be honest, I think it's all of these factors that are sort of affecting Fleming and his use of scrambled eggs. I mean, how could they not? They all kind of come together and meld, whether he actually meant it or not. If you've been watching this far, I thank you. Bye.